Hello, hello, everyone. This is Christina Jedena from Boundless Love here at Cafecito for Two. So excited to have a power couple on here. I think it's super cool because they both have their own individual space, even y'all. We have Ruth and Maurice Green, and they are coming from the same home but different studios. And I think we all can relate or take some wisdom from that. Today we're talking about them and their projects and also just their wisdom around their own marriage and relationships that they have learned along the way. So I just want to officially and formally welcome you both onto Cafecito for Two. Thank you so much for being willing to come on and enjoy the space with us all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
So I usually ask our guests to please introduce themselves. So it's up to you, whoever we would like to go first, and just share a little bit about your story, your introduction. You can do, one at a time and then a joint version, whatever works for you.
Okay, ladies first. Go, Ruth.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, I guess I'm going first then. So I am Ruth Griffin. I am a writer and a publisher. I've written 8 books. Most of them are romance. So that is my preferred genre, and I love happily ever afters. My last book was actually co-written with my husband, Maurice, who you'll hear from in a minute. And it was actually kind of a memoir of our journey. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 depression about 18 years ago, and it was a rough period, but through our faith, it's gotten a lot better. Our marriage has improved to heights that we didn't think we could get there. So, and the book is titled When Love is Angry, and it's available on most online bookstores. And it was an interesting journey getting there to write it, but we're on the other side of that, and it's been incredible. So that's me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maurice, do you want to chime in here and let us learn about you? Because I'm sure you have so much as part of this journey. It's just like, this is such an incredible topic on so many levels.
Yes, it is. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Maurice Griffin. I'm married to the lady on my far right. That's Ruth Griffin. I'm her husband. I am not an author. Even though I am a published author, I am not. This was God. I'm just gonna tell you the truth. It was God. I was the BC student in English. I did enough to get by. I write and talk conversationally, so I wasn't like that. So book was not in nowhere near in the radar. So this is definitely God. When I'm not doing that, I am I work in the local media here in our state, which is North Carolina, and I am an entrepreneur too. I have my own barbecue sauce that I sell. It's a Kansas City style barbecue sauce. So when I'm not doing my career, I'm doing that too. So, but it is an interesting journey. The book actually came, crazy as it sounds, even though my wife's the publisher, author, writer, the book actually was birthed through me, because I was just kind of, as I was going through it and kind of listening and having conversations with God, and God kind of explained to me what my wife was going through with her bipolar and depression. Once I got quiet and listened to him, it's really basically started out just basically a memoir. I wanted to share it with my kids, just basically saying, hey, when you guys get older and get married, and when you get older and get husbands, they're all grown now, and husbands and wives and things of that nature. This is the real part of marriage. Marriage is just, there are real parts of marriage where two people who love each other, they don't agree, they don't see eye to eye. And this is how you navigate. And if nothing else, this is what dad made mistakes on, and don't do them. That was really the crux of it. And God kind of morphed it. He had a bigger vision. So that's it in a nutshell. So I will turn it back over to you, and we can dive into it a little bit. If I'm sure I'm looking at you got questions, so shoot away.
I guess the first thing is, first of all, I just want to commend both of you for just being so open around the mental health piece, because as you know, I mean, I'm a social worker by trade, so I understand in some probably a little bit more direct way just how the struggles are to get heard and to be seen, to even get good care. Is not always an easy thing. That could be a real blessing just to have somewhere to go and get what you need, right?
Yeah.
To get well and to feel whole. So I really appreciate your willingness to even be so candid and transparent and open around that. And I think it's really life-giving to everyone because, as you know, in marriage, like you just referenced, Maurice, it's kind of like we always talk about it as there's the image of what a relationship is, right? Or marriage. And then there's sort of the bones and, you know, the grit and the meat underneath, not to be like too much of a barbecue reference there, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's the other level and, and it's so refreshing. And that's really why we wrote our book too, is to really show that, you know, we all have breakdowns, right? And it's what are we going to leverage? Who are we going to go to? And with our human mind, at least for us, we knew that our issues and our problems were bigger than our human minds. That there was no way if we just relied on our intellect, we would ever kind of figure it out, fix it, all of that. So I'm curious around a couple things, and we can go wherever you want to go, whatever direction. I'm curious around how you got still in your relationship with God, Maurice, to get those messages. Was that through prayer? Was that just in your day-to-day life? Like, obviously you have a relationship, but I'm curious around that process because I know from myself and my experience, but also our audience, that sometimes it's very challenging. We can talk to God, but listening to God is a whole nother level.
Yes. In the nutshell, I didn't get quiet. I was too busy talking to God, and God finally sovereign God showed up and said things. So it was, to be honest with you, to answer your question directly, I didn't get quiet. God pretty much said, you need to do this. Otherwise, you're going down a road that you will pretty much regret. So I was like, oh, okay. And he walked me through what Ruth was going through. And when I got quiet, it really did. It blew my mind. I was like, so she's going through that all by herself, even though I'm coexisting with her, and she's raising kids and she's doing this. And I was just, it was a sobering moment to say the least. So, I mean, to answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So Ruth, where were you in this process, and how did this, you know, did you all of a sudden realize your husband's like changing his behavior? And then how did that lead to the book?
Well, for me, I was in the middle of the illness. We'll call it what it is. So it is an illness. You know, you may not see the actual symptoms, but you'll see what happens, you know, when someone has that. And I was in therapy, I was in, you know, taking medication, but because I wasn't 100% invested in it, there were no results. So we didn't argue a lot, but we got to the point where we weren't talking. And to me, that was almost the final straw. You know, we had a situation where we ended up, and it was just like, okay, I'm ready to give up. And thank God for my sister, because she talked me down. And in that moment, she said, just pray and give him up to God. And I was like, okay. And I did it grudgingly, but God heard me. And he told me to be still. He told me to be quiet. And in those moments, I started, my prayer started changing. It wasn't, okay, what's wrong with him? It was more like, okay, God, you take care of him. I'll start taking care of me. And that's when I started getting serious about my treatment. I started listening to what God was telling me. I had been through about 3 therapists. I had been through about 7 medications. None of it seemed to work. And during the whole time, God is telling me, hey, keep track of your moods, keep track of what you're doing. And even as I started doing that, and, it wasn't overnight, all of this process started around the same time, I would say. But, we were in different places, and I think we were now headed in the same direction. And when I started listening, when I started saying, okay, God, I'm not going to worry about what he's doing. You see it. Right. I'm going to worry about me. I think that for me, that's when I started seeing the change. And as I started getting better, I saw him now talking to me. Now saying, now vesting himself, whereas, it wasn't there before. So I really believe that God brought us to this, we ended up in the same place, and God was working on me as he was working on him. And we were able to get to the better place together. So, and that, I think it was at that point that, because I always knew I would end up writing my story. I just didn't figure on doing it this way, because it never would have occurred to me to have him write it first and then me write, because it's kind of, it shows both our perspectives. And honestly, we've gotten most response from our readers because of that, because they're able to say, okay, I understand as a caregiver, I understand as someone who's going through it. And I would have never done it that way. So I'm grateful that God did it the way he did it, because we were both able to tell our story, which ended up being the same story.
Yeah, and with such integrity, right? Because you're both true to your own experience, but it's certainly intertwined.
Yes.
I find that so amazing in marriage, especially when you look at it through a lens of faith. Is that so much of people speak to falling on their knees, like literally and figuratively in their marriage. And when you release your spouse or partner to God and simply let go, like that attachment to outcome, like controlling it, wanting to fix it, whatever it is, that's where your faith gets uplifted, right? And you have this surrender, this spiritual surrender. And that's where the Holy Spirit can really flow. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel that is such a common theme.
Oh, yeah.
But for all of us, and I'm sure the listeners can relate, it's very painful to get to that place. Like, you don't just, like, all of a sudden one day, right? Like, okay, I'm willing. So it sounds like he worked on your hearts for a long time. Definitely.
I think that's fair to say. You hear it preached from the pulpit often. It's just, when you get to the end of yourself, that's when God starts. And, the end of yourself is usually a very painful place, is very raw place, and like I said, I was really to the point of giving up. I was ready, and with the bipolar, to some degree, I was already thinking about death. So, it was really a final spot. It was really, for me, a place of, I'm done. I am just done with this marriage, done with this, almost done with Earth. So, that is a very painful place to be in. But if you can give it up to God at that point, I mean, hopefully you can do it before that, but whatever it takes to get you to that, I think that it's, God can take it from there and he can make it better than, you could even dream or imagine.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Maurice, I'm really curious for you, like when you said it was a sovereign God that spoke to you, what kind of helped you move from like really hearing like, I am going down the wrong path, to like giving you hope that you could reconcile, reconstruct your marriage. Like, can you walk us through, like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's in the book. Basically.
Okay, we'll have it all in the notes, folks. We'll have it all in the notes.
I had to slide that. I had to just kind of try you with the plug. It's in the book because you got to get the book to read. But basically, what happened with me, just to tell you in a nutshell, I had gripe sessions with God. My job, I work in the media, so I spend a lot of time in my car, and I'm traveling around our area, and we live in kind of a spread out area that's growing, so I cover a lot of ground. So I'm spending, like today, just to get to and from my assignment was like probably 2 hours. So I had that time. And so, and that's kind of like an average. So I was spending this time in my car, and I was literally, thank God for Bluetooth, because if this would have happened 7, 8 years, 10 years ago, people would have thought it was crazy, because I would be literally driving down the road, having this type of conversation with God. But it was mostly me griping about my life. I was like, she don't do this. She don't do that. I can't talk to her. I this, that, and the other. It's always negative. It's always this. And I was just telling him about stuff over and over. And then sometimes I would even role play, like if I tried to talk to her, what she would say, this, that, and the other. And finally, one day I was having a gripe session, and these were the words that the Holy Spirit spoke to me. He said, your wife's a good woman, right? That's all he said. But speaking from a spiritual aspect, how many, we all know that when he says a statement, there is a lot more that comes with it. And basically, he basically, when he said that, he's like, what you're fussing about, somebody will take and love to the end of the earth. And at that point, it was like, this is the second time he had showed me that I will close this door if you just, and so that's why I say sovereign God showed me. He said, I will close, this door will close. It ain't going to be open forever. Don't take this gift for granted. And so at that point, I had a decision to make. I was either going to let the door close, or I was going to go through it. And almost begrudgingly, like Ruth from the other end, begrudgingly, I was just like, okay, I just got to do it. I got to do this. And I just, okay, what's my game plan? What is the game plan? How do we start walking this back? So that was the sovereign God moment. And you will see it wasn't a big thing. And that's what happens in marriages.
Right.
It's not the big thing. It's the little stuff. That's the details of the marriage. And I tell people now, we haven't really did it, but if people ask, what do you do? Pay attention to the details. Don't worry about the big stuff. A lot of times people talk about the big stuff. Forget the big stuff. The details is where you're either going to make it or break it, because just a simple detail, when Ruth is going through this, and I think most people are, that I think, and I'm not sure, because I'm not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most people who deal with depression and bipolar, at some points they become really combative. Like, no matter what you say, they come back and they're ready to fight. And so a lot of times I would say in those little moments, I would shut down. I'll be like, I'm not fighting with you. I didn't marry you to fight you. So I would shut down instead of taking the time to say, okay, this ain't about me. What's going on here? And not do that. It was the little things like that. It didn't happen all the time, but when it happened, I would just kind of be like, this is what I do. And that would be it, and it would drive, and Ruth would just get, and I'll let her explain, but I could tell by her look, that would just send her off the deep end. Like, this dude won't even talk to me. So I'm paying attention to the details.
Yep. No, thank you for that. I think you're right. Like, one little gesture, you mix up the pattern of your relationship and your interactions. Even one little shift can set off a big ripple effect. Do you know what I'm saying? Like what you were saying, like my husband, he grew up, he lost his mother when he was 2. He lost his father when he was 12. Actually this week I had a sinus infection, so I wasn't feeling very well. I haven't been really sick for a long time because we've been on lockdown or whatnot. You know what I mean? Like, so this is the longest I've been sick. And for him, that's very triggering because he lost both of his parents. Right. And so when I get sick, granted, I am, as a lot of women, not all, but a lot of, I am like the force of the house, right? Like I center my family a lot. And so he gets very groundless when I get, you know what I'm saying? And so it's taken us over 16 years to be able to talk about what's really happening. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
And so for me to say, you know what, this is a sinus infection, I'm going to be okay. And for him just to own, you know, what comes up for me is my fear of like being abandoned, because that's what happened to me when I was a kid, you know, just like putting it out. That can be a huge shift in like arguing or being stressed or him yelling at the girls or the kid, you know what I'm saying? Like, get this, you know, all this stuff that's residual grief or whatever, you know, because we don't know what always is we're bringing to things, right? We don't recognize all the patterns that we are, for example, stuck in. And what you're talking about, like, for example, for him, because he, and this happened for me too, you know, grew up in an era, I'm sure maybe you can relate, like children were seen but not heard, right?
Yep.
You were supposed to respond to your elders. And so in my husband's family, they wouldn't even get eye contact, right? So for him, a big connection point is making eye contact with me. But I have a tendency to get busy or multitask. And so sometimes I don't give that, right? So
you're not alone, Christina. You are not alone. Guilty as charged.
Thank you. So my whole piece was, I did an experiment. This was like a month ago, where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop when he comes to me. I'm serious. Like, I'll just, even if I'm cooking, I'll turn things down and I will look at him, make eye contact, and be present when he talks to me. And I'm telling you, it was a game changer because first of all, it did not take that much time, for real.
Yeah.
Second of all, it totally shifted the dynamic because it was more intimate and you actually have a real exchange and you can move on. Do you get what? So what you're pointing to, it just reminds me of all these little things that is so key. Like, you're right. It's so much about these details, but it's also kind of getting yourself dusted off or getting out of the muck of sometimes just reacting or being in a pattern with this person that maybe you've gotten in together or maybe you've inherited, but you don't know how to get out of until you actually think about it. Right.
Yeah. We actually had that Sunday with we had a Mother's Day special after at our church, and I do our church has a media ministry, so I was working on that. So Ruth and I we don't sit together, so I was just sitting there and they were talking about something, and God just triggered something, and he brought me back over 20 years ago, and I was like, whoa, what? And so when I got into the car, I just basically told her, I was like, this happened to you when we first got together. I didn't know what to do. To be honest with you, I was in a stupid place, did a stupid thing. And I said, I'm late to the party, but I'm here. So the door is open. So if you ever get to the point where you need to talk and you need to, I said, I don't care what it is. I don't care how bad it is. You need to get it out. You need to get it out. And so when you said that, it's just like those details and what I'm discovering even in our relationship. And it really is in a great space. But I'm finding God is taking us back to places to just heal it. And sometimes healing is just coming back and saying, hey, I need to know how you feel. I need to know that at this point you didn't have a voice. I mean, you had a voice, but I wasn't listening. So really, you didn't have a voice. So now I need to hear the voice. So now we can go on, and now I can and begin to understand. And that's the part of marriage that we don't talk about enough. I don't think we just need to talk about it. You got to understand your spouse. You got to study them. You got to figure them out. You got to understand, and then you have to work with that. and you have to be willing to, and I say it all the time, it's kind of like from birth, it's birth from the book, but when you really love somebody, you take blows. Love takes blows. It takes that for the other person. You take it because you love that person. And it's even more prevalent because I've just been going through on my personal journey, just where God's leading me now, is walking through the book of John and how Jesus' journey is. And just, I'm kind of thrown off and really marvel at the sacrifices he made for love and what it cost him. And I was thinking about it on the way home. I was like, you know what? They say love doesn't hurt, but honestly, if you really love somebody, I really beg to differ. It shouldn't physically hurt. That means nobody should be putting their hands on you no matter what. But emotionally, if you really love somebody, it's going to hurt. And it's going to go both ways because we're human and we make mistakes. And just like you was talking about with your husband, I bet you if you really digged into that, when you didn't make eye contact, there was an emotional something that happened there that probably hurt him. And so I just use that example because that's the first one I think of. But really, that's all of us. We love hurts sometimes. But when you love somebody, you say, you know what? I'll take this pain to make sure that they are better. If I can make them better by taking this, I will gladly do it and do it over and over and over again. So.
Ruth, did you want to speak to that at all? I also heard recently, and I'm sure you have too, that aging is about forgiveness, just in general, right? And I really see that in marriage too. Like, and that's sort of speaking to what you just shared too, Maurice, is that so much of your journey, you know, I don't know about you, but I definitely have much more compassion. Let's just put it this way than I used to. You know what I'm saying? Like, it humbles you, you know, in a good way. So I'm just curious if you wanted to share anything on that.
No, absolutely. And I think that is definitely interesting because, you know, when you're focused on the right thing, forgiveness is not an issue, you know, and I'll take it, the book, for example. Maurice started writing the book. He didn't tell me what he was doing. He just, one day he was like, oh, I wrote a book. I'll email it to you. You have to finish writing it. And I thought, what? I had not planned to write the book just yet. So, you know, it was, you know, again, we were in that place. We had never been quite as open in our conversation, in our communication. So it was always, you know, our conversation would be personal only to a certain degree. And when he wrote his part of the book, it was raw and it was open and it was just personal in a way that he had not been before, you know, so I was getting information. I was getting his feelings from the last, 20 years. And it was like, oh, okay. And some of it, you know, if I had been in the wrong mindset, I may have been offended. I may have been hurt. I may have been like, what the heck, you know, and I think to a certain degree, he was maybe a little bit scared of what I was thinking as I read it, but you know,
note taken.
Yeah. So, but honestly, you know, even as I read it, it was just like, I wanted to make sure that I was right. Not in that, oh, you know, you're wrong, I'm right, but that I was in a better place, that he could see it, that we were moving together, you know, and I really, you know, you said something a little bit early about realizing the patterns that we're stuck in. You know, for me, part of my journey has been to see those patterns. You know, that's why God had told me, you know, start tracking your moods, start tracking what you're doing, you know, because I was able to start seeing patterns and I was able to understand, oh, I'm getting stuck here or I'm getting stuck there, or, you know, emotionally, this was the place I was stuck in for the longest time. And even now, it's not a journey that ends. It'd be nice if,
Right.
God could show us something and whoop, that's it. We're good for the rest of our lives. But, even today I was having a conversation with a coworker and we were talking about those things, that, you realize God is still showing to you, and it's just realizing that he wants you to get unstuck. He wants you to be whole. It's not just healed.
Mhm.
I truly believe I'm healed of bipolar, but that's only part of it. That's only part of
Right.
what ails me. So it is about that wholeness. And when you're focused on that, and when you got your eyes set on God, those little things, they just don't bother you anymore. So when I read that book, I was like, okay, good to know, because now I could understand why he had responded the way he had, why he had said, why we had gone through what he had gone through from his perspective. I knew why we went through what we went through from my perspective, but now we could paint a whole picture together, and honestly, letting go wasn't that hard at that point, and even now, we don't argue. I don't think we do. No, it's just gotten to the point where it's just, okay, that's pointless. Life, I won't say we wasted 20 some odd years, but it's just like, you know what? Life is good. We're in a good spot. Life was made to be enjoyed. Why would we hold on to those things? So it's, you deal with coworkers, you deal with things, and it's just like, you know what? You're not even worth my time. So,
Right.
I think as long as your focus is right, especially in your
Yes.
marriage, and you're understanding, you know what? We always said divorce was never an option. I think we came close to start thinking about it, maybe. But we remained in the marriage, I think, because our focus was on God and we were able to eventually let go of those things that were getting in the way because of that.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Ruth. I think that that's so key. And that's really the message of what we want to share, is that I know it's not an easy road and everyone has their spiritual path to walk, right? And where they find their faith. But I do think that you're right. It is what anchors you like no other. And it's also, like you said, it lifts you outside of yourself. And what I was hearing from what you're saying too, is it's around your priorities, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to really go down that road of petty arguments or gossiping or focusing on office politics, it's because you are willing to identify a higher power or different energy you want to lead towards, right? Like that's where you want to go. And I think that is, your marriage is a testimony around that, because for a lot of people, and we all have our crosses to carry. I mean, we all have, everyone has pain and suffering. I mean, absolutely. We all know that. And there's just different twists and turns, but, I think that you are a gift. Your relationship, your marriage is a gift and a testimony to show that there's nothing impossible, nothing insurmountable, and that even something that could be potentially considered really scary, because a lot of our society doesn't understand bipolar, right? Or, mental illness, like you said, as an illness. It's like, okay, well, that's just going to take over, or there's, I'm powerless over that. How can I even begin to win that battle in my marriage, right? And you're here to say that that's just not the case.
Right. It is possible, and I will say this. My favorite scripture now is 1 Corinthians 10:13, where it states that, God has a way out. Whatever ails you, whatever your affliction is, it uses the word temptation, but it also applies to affliction. Whatever it is, God has a way out, and if you could just turn to him, there's nothing bigger than him, for the longest time. And that was my biggest struggle, because you hear people being healed of, cancer and all these other things, but there's never that I have heard of. People who say, oh, I had mental illness and God healed me.
Right.
So you think, okay, I found the one thing that God can't do. But that's not the case. That is not the case. And it'll put a strain on your marriage. It'll put a strain on your relationships. It'll put a strain, whatever is in your life, it'll put a strain on it. But if you can just put your faith in God and believe that He has a way out, you'll find that. And He can heal. And like I said, He wants to make you whole. It's not just about healing you. It is about healing every part of you. And that includes your marriage, your relationships. They won't be perfect. Nothing is. But they'll be in a far better place.
Amen to that. Well, can you please share where folks can find your book and any other information about you? Because this is a real gift. And I just want to encourage our listeners today to share this podcast. We'll be putting it out and it'll be on social, etc. But if you ever feel like there's a couple or an individual that needs to hear this message, listen to that, right? Listen to that prompting from God, because that person needs this. So I just would love to make that available to whoever is listening right now.
Absolutely. And our book is titled When Love is Angry. It is by Ruth and Maurice Griffin, and it is available on all major platforms online. So you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, wherever you get your books, paperback and ebook. You can visit my website, ruthegriffin.com, and my husband has his own website. While you're reading the book.
I gotta check it out.
Mm-hmm. Instagram. Ruth Elena, Elena Griffin on Instagram.
Awesome. And we'll put that all in the notes, so there won't be a quiz. You don't have to memorize it, and you can just go flip through whatever you want. But, right? And take the good.
Absolutely.
And thank you both for being here and sharing your story. You have no idea what an impact. I'm sure you do, but I hope, even more that this is a gift to share this. Mm-hmm. And we're just so honored that you were willing to do it with us. So thank you very, very much.
And thank you for having us. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Right on. Well, thank you again. And thank you everyone for listening to Cafecito for Two. We'll see you next time. And until then, God bless.